That Lass of LOWRIE'S by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Chapter 7. Annice went to see Liz. Perhaps if the truth were told, she went to see Joan more than to visit her protégée, though her interest extended from the one to the other. But she did not see Joan, she only heard of her. Liz met her visitor without any manifestations of enthusiasm. She was grateful, but gratitude was not a powerful emotion with her. Indeed, it scarcely amounted to an emotion at all. But Annice began to attract her somewhat before she had been in the house 10 minutes. Liz found, first, that she was not one of the enemy, and did not come to read a homily to her concerning her sins and transgressions. Having her mind set at ease thus far, she found time to be interested in her. Her visitor's beauty, a prettiness of toilet, a certain delicate grace of presence, were all virtues in Lizzie's eyes. She was so fond of pretty things herself, she had been wont to feel such pleasure and pride in her own beauty, that such outward charms were the strongest of charms to her ignorance. She forgot to be abashed and miserable, when, after talking a few minutes, Annice came to her and bent over the child as it lay on her knee. She even had the courage to regard the material of her dress with some degree of interest. "You ain't getting that there in London," she ventured, wistfully touching the pretty silk with her fingers. "There's no one such in Wregan." "Yes," answered Annice, letting the baby's hand cling to her fingers. "I bought it in London." Liz touched it again, and this time the wistfulness in her touch crept up to her eyes, mingled with a little fretfulness. "Everything's fine a comes fra London," she said. "It's the grandest place in world. I dunno wonder as Queen lives there. I were happy all time I were there. I never were so happy in my life. I can hardly bear to think on it. It gives me such a wearying and longing. I wish I could go back, I do," ending with a sob. "Don't think about it any more than you can help," said Annice gently. "It is very hard, I know. Don't cry, Liz." "I can't help it," sobbed Liz, "and I can do no more help thinking on it. That child there can help thinking on its milk. I'm hungry all time, and I dunna care to live. I waken up in night hungering and crying for what I ha' not got, and never shall have again." The tears ran down her cheeks, and she whimpered like a child. The sight of the silk dress had brought back to mind her lost bit of paradise, as nothing else would have done. Her own small store of finery, the gaiety and novelty of London's sounds and sights. Annice knelt down upon the flagged floor, still holding the child's hand. "Don't cry," she said again. "Look at the baby, Liz. It is a pretty baby. Perhaps, if it lives, it may be a comfort to you some day." "Nay, it winna," said Liz, regarding it resentfully. "I never could tak no comfort in it. It's nowt but a trouble. I dunna like it. I canna. It would be better if it wouldna live. I canna tell thee where Joan Lowrie gets her patience from. I had no patience with little mad thing mysen, always whimpering and crying. I didn't know what to do with it half the time." Annice took it from her lap, and sitting down upon a low wooden stool, held it gently, looking at its small round face. It was a pretty little creature, pretty with Lizzie's own beauty, or at least with the baby promise of it. Annice stooped and kissed it, her heart stirred by the feebly strong clasp of the clinging fingers. During the remainder of her visit, she sat holding the child on her knee, and talking to it as well as to its mother. But she made no attempt to bring Liz to what Mr. Barhome had called a fitting sense of her condition. She was not fully settled in her opinion as to what Lizzie's fitting sense would be, so she simply made an effort to please and awaken her to interest, and she succeeded very well. When she went away, the girl was evidently sorry to see her go. "I don't often want to see folk twice," she said, looking at her in a shy, awkward way. "But I'd like to see you. You're not like the rest. You dunna harry me with talk. Joan said you wouldna." "I will come again," said her niece. During her visit, Liz had told her much of Joan. She seemed to like to talk of her, and certainly her niece had been quite ready to listen. "She isn't easy to mak out," said Liz, "and perhaps that's reason why folks put their sends to so much trouble to mak her out. She's getting ways of her own, as Joan Lowrie." "That is true enough," said Fergus Derrick, when her niece repeated the words to him. "She's getting ways of her own." He thought of Joan in a metaphysical, unsentimental fashion, but she haunted him, nevertheless, until sometimes he almost lost patience with himself. It was like recurring again and again and again to the fragment of a tune from which his mind would not loose itself. Even Grace, with whom she had become a burden of conscience, surely never was haunted by her so perpetually. When he passed the cottage on the Knoll Road in going home at night, Fergus could not help looking out for her. Sometimes he saw her, and sometimes he did not, but whether he saw her or not, there was actually a sort of excitement in passing the cottage. During the warm weather, he saw her often at the door or near the gate, almost always with the child in her arms. There was no awkward shrinking in her manner at such time, no vestige of the clumsy conscientiousness usually exhibited by girls of her class. She met his glance with a grave quietude, scarcely touched with interest, he thought. He never observed that she smiled, though he was uncomfortably conscious now and then that she stood and calmly watched him out of sight.